Seriously, guys, this is not a Yismach Moshe Thursday night schmoozing. We're having wings. We're learning the daf. We got to finish the daf, okay? We can schmooze about it afterwards. We can schmooze about it before, but not during. Okay. I love you guys all with love. Okay, says the Gemara. We're holding on Daf Gimel, moving along in Yevamos. Today is not going to be too much of a diagram day, so hopefully we're picking up from the Gemara. So we're coming off the Mishnah, just very briefly. The Mishnah in Yevamos, the first Mishnah in the Masechta, was discussing the whole concept of the Tzaras Erva. What's a Tzaras Erva? We discussed very quickly. And again, there you go. Okay, so the Mishnah had said, we were talking about a Tzaras Erva. What's a Tzaras Erva? So if two brothers, one of the brothers is married to two ladies, one of the ladies is related to his brother. Whatever the scenario is, we don't have to go to the specifics right now. And he dies. So one of the ladies falling to the brothers an erva, and one of the ladies falling to the brothers a non-erva. Non-ervas, the regular din of yibum. The erva, there is no din of yibum, right? Now, why is there no din of yibum? We assume it's because he's not allowed to be with that woman, but that's not so simple. Why is that?
Ladies who passed away, who died?
Okay, we'll start again. Reuven and Shimon, brothers. Yeah. Okay. Now Shimon is married to a woman. Let's call her Joan. I like Joan. Joan's a good name. And his other wife is Reuven's.
He has two wives?
Yeah.
4 wives, 8 wives, 12 wives. Okay, I said it was not a diagram day. Today is a diagram day. I changed my mind.
I know why you chose Joan, because I married Joan.
I don't even know Joan.
Oh, it's a very old Talmud.
The guy has two wives.
Let me talk. And then afterwards, if you have questions, you can ask questions.
Oh, really? I married Joan.
Yeah, wow.
He told me they only watched.
There we go. Can you see if I stand like this?
Yeah.
For the Zoom camp or
Reuven. And you have Shimon.
You want to turn it? Yeah. He's gonna turn it. I got it.
You can see it.
No, to the board.
Yeah.
Oh, it shows.
Well, now he's standing there. What? Yeah, let's just.
Okay, I didn't know that. What a question.
Oh, you mean
It follows
the camera angle? How much?
That's really cool.
How much can it turn?
It follows because when I came
There we go. Okay. Reuven and Shimon. Can you see?
I see.
For him. Hello. For you. Can you see?
Okay.
Reuven and Shimon. These guys are brothers, right? So their dad.
He's Yaakov.
Their dad and mom had 2 kids. Reuven and Shimon. Yeah. Okay. Now Shimon went ahead and got married. Let's say he got married to the first girl. We'll change her name from Joan to Rachel. Yeah. Now let's say Rachel. I'm going to move a little bit here. Let's say, can everyone still see?
Yeah.
Okay. So Rachel, and he married another lady. Let's call this one
Leah.
Leah.
7,000.
Ankles bit. None of you guys professors who do this. Okay, married Leah.
Takes care of these.
Yeah. Now, who is Leah?
Shimon's daughter.
Reuven's daughter.
Reuven's daughter.
So Shimon married
His niece.
his niece. Completely allowed. Nothing wrong with it. A little weird, but definitely 100% mutter.
Very common.
Yeah.
Very common.
So Leah went ahead and married her uncle. Very common. Now, what happened now? Now,
Shimon died.
Shimon dies.
Right. Never.
To make a rabbi.
Yeah.
He's
The
dead.
rabbi.
But Rachel Leah falls down to Reuven.
Now, what happens when a brother dies, leaving over no kids? So his entire group of wives
Falls down.
now have a halacha that they have to do yibum to brother.
If she wouldn't be his relative, he would have to be miyab and both of
One
them.
of them.
One of the two.
Why is it?
If there's 10 wives, 1 second. If there's 10 wives, he has to do it with one of them. Now, if let's say he says, I'm not interested in being married to you, which is what the byproduct of this yibum is, then they do chalitza. Chalitza is where one of the ladies goes over to Reuven. He sits on a chair. She takes off his shoe. She spits on the ground, says, you're a whatever for not taking care of your brothers,
Shreita.
whatever, you're a shreita. And that's the end of it. And then they move on. And for the rest of their lives, all of those ladies are usher to Reuven because they're the wife of his brother, Eishes Ach. However, if he chooses to do Yibum, then whoever he does Yibum with becomes his wife forever, like a regular normal wife. And the other ladies are now free to go marry whoever they want, and they are usher to him because they are, again, an Eishes Ach. So now, let's say Shimon dies, and Leah here is the daughter of Reuven. And now this group of women are falling to Reuven, right? So now the problem is that although Rachel is 100% kosher for Yibum,
Leah.
Leah is completely not. Why? Because that's his daughter. He can't do Yibum with her. Sex with your daughter is a problem. Sex with Rachel is no problem. But since they're all part of the same house, this bias, it's sort of viewed as like you're either in for one. What's that phrase? You're in for one, you're in for a dozen, whatever the phrase goes. I forget the phrase, whatever. It's all together. If anyone in this house,
It's like a sick.
In for a penny, in for a pound.
in for a penny, in for a pound, thank you. Once Leah is problematic, then basically what the Torah is saying over here is Leah is outside of the Torah's view of who's allowed to do Yibum. Well, then what is Leah if she can't do Yibum, right? She's just another Eishes Ach. She's also his daughter.
Right.
She's just a regular Eishes Ach. You can't have a house falling to Reuven that contains any wife's brother that have no mitzvah Yibum. So therefore, Rachel now becomes an Eishes Ach that has no mitzvah.
Rachel has no chiyuv yibum.
Now she doesn't. Wait, we're going to blow your mind in a second, yeah? Now, let's say in this example, not only was there Reuven and Shimon, but there was another brother,
Levi.
Levi.
Right.
And Levi, let's say, had a wife. Let's say her name was Sarah. Okay? Now, since Reuven can't do Yibum with Leah,
Or
and
Rachel.
then by extension, he can't do it with Rachel, we're going to give this Rachel another name. We're going to call her.
She should have to do yibum with Levi.
So then 1 second. So we're going to give Rachel a term. She's referred to as the Tzara. Tzara just means the other one, the co-wife. She's the Tzara of Leah. Leah's Tzara. Rachel is her Tzara, and Leah is Rachel's Tzara. They're both Tzaras of each other. Yeah, there could be 12 of them. They'd all be Tzaros. Now, this Tzara is called a Tzaras Erva. Leah's an Erva. That's a daughter. Yeah. So she's an Erva. That's a Tzara. She's a Tzaras Erva. That's Rachel. Now, Reuven, because of the unique relationship he has with Leah, this entire bias, from Reuven's perspective, doesn't exist. As far as Reuven is concerned, these are just two regular wives of a brother that he's not allowed to be with. Therefore, Reuven is absolved of any Yibum Chalitza with anyone here, and they are absolved of any Yibum Chalitza with Reuven. However, since Levi exists, the bias of Shimon, meaning his house, still has to solve this. Meaning, if Levi didn't exist, Rachel and Leah go free. But if Levi exists, when Shimon dies, that's a key point. If Levi's still around, if Levi's around when Shimon dies, then since Levi has no illicit relationship with any of these ladies, these are two regular.
He should have to do yibum with Rachel over Leah.
Why?
Either one.
With either
I
one.
understand either one, but preferably Rachel.
Just out of curiosity, why?
Because she's less.
There's nothing wrong with him being with, just like Shimon married
I know there's nothing wrong, but
Reuven's
it's,
daughter.
but it's
Levi can marry Leah's
It's
daughter.
less creepy,
Right?
yes.
that's creepy.
Yes,
I agree,
okay.
but
Yes,
you
if you'd
can
asked the
still
rabbi,
do
maybe
both.
that would be the case. So now, Levi has another wife, Sarah. Well, should change her name to Dina.
Why?
Because I'm about to call her Sarah, and I don't want to. Okay, she's a Sarah. I don't want to tweet Sarah. So he's married to Dina. So now, Levi says, all right, you know what? I got to take care of business. So instead of going and doing Yibum with Leah, he listens to my friend over here, and he goes and does Yibum with Rachel. So now Rachel becomes his second wife.
Then he died.
Now we have an Erva. That's a Tzaras Erva. So Rachel's a Tzara. And what's Dina? Dina is a Tzara
Sarah,
of a Tzara.
Sarah.
So we call it a Tzaras.
That is a
Tzara. Tzara. Yeah.
Wait, with Leah, we call her Sars Erva?
Well, over here, Leah's the Erva. She's the Erva
So it's
itself.
Erva,
Yeah,
not-
she's
okay,
the Bas.
that's fine.
She's the daughter, or whatever the other 14 are. Rachel's a Tzaras Erva. Now, let's just think about it. From Reuven's perspective, Leah's his daughter. He can't do Yibum with her. That's obvious. We explained that Rachel also not. Okay, now, who is, let's say Reuven were to go have sex with Rachel right now. He's being over on an Aveira.
Yeah.
What's the Aveira he's being over on?
Exactly.
Why
I want to make sure we all understand that.
why is Reuben usher to Rachel again?
Because he is the wife.
His daughter.
She's the wife of Shimon. Shimon, his brother,
Right.
which is one of the
What
lists.
happens if he dies?
We asked one question at a time. here.
Yesterday. Where were you yesterday?
One question at a time. One question at a time. That's
Oh,
a
you
great
left
question. One question at a time.
yesterday.
Right.
We did this yesterday.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanna know- I told
One
you-
question at a time. It's really it's in our best interest. If someone asks a question, and I say this with love, for everyone else to just be
Right.
quiet. Because if you're talking, not only does that question not get answered and
No
that
question.
person's confused, then you think you're asking a smart question, selfishly thinking your question is the only one that matters,
Right.
but you ruin it for everyone else. So I love you guys, but it's really not helpful. He had a question. You had a question,
Why
which was?
is Rachel Sar? I mean, why can't Reuben?
So calm him, tell him why. You want to talk? You tell him why. By the way, I know you know. Why is Rachel, let's say now, Reuven is going to go have sex with Rachel.
Right. Why is that usher?
Why is that us? Think about it. No, it's okay. There's no wrong answer. We're going to work it out together. This is how you teach. Yes, questions.
Brother's wife.
Once the bias was knocked out,
But I want
because
to
it's
think-
always, it's forever.
But what if? Well, what do you mean? If Leah wasn't his daughter, then Rachel is allowed to be with Reuven. In fact, there's a mitzvah. It's specifically because Leah is his daughter, and now Rachel can't be. Why?
Oh, I think I can answer. I mean,
Answer
well,
one
is
question.
it because Leah is already like whatever is nullified, therefore Rachel is also? I don't.
Yeah,
I don't know why. I don't know why.
So we'll see in a moment on today's Gemara. There's a pasuk that's going to tell us why, but I'm discussing the mechanism.
Because they're in the same bias. Or
Yes.
Right.
Because they're in the same bias, we're going to see from today's pasuk that means that everyone in this bias
Right.
now can't do yibum. So the understanding is, though, let's say forget yibum. Let's say Rachel's walking down the street, runs into Reuven. They go into a bar, buys her a drink, and he wants to know if he could take her home. There you go. You answered the question. But I thought Eshesach is mutter when it's a brother who does. So the answer is that if there's no mitzvah of yibum, which he has no mitzvah of yibum here because Leah knocks it out, well, then she just reverts to being a regular, normal Eshesach, which is in the Torah, which is it's like it would be the equivalent of if Shimon died with children. If Shimon died with children, both of these ladies, Rachel would certainly be also to Reuven. Well, if Rachel doesn't have a mitzvah of yibum, then she's just a regular, normal, run-of-the-mill Eshesach. So now he left because he left us with the tzarich in yet. So he said, okay, now what happens if Levi dies? So now Levi's dying, and he still has a brother that's alive, Reuven. So there's a yibum relationship here. But the problem is that Rachel, who was already once a problem with Reuven because she became an Eshesach that didn't have a mitzvah yibum, which means she became an erva. That's an erva. That's one of the ervas. No less chomer, no less stringent than the erva of daughter. They're listed all together. Well, it is less stringent in terms of punishment, but in terms of this idea of being an erva, Leah is no stronger of an erva to remove yibum than an Eshesach that has no mitzvah. So now Dinah, who has zero relationship with anybody except being Levi's unwitting second wife, now Levi dies, and these women, because Levi has a brother, don't they have a yibum problem? Meaning one of them has to do yibum, or one of them has to get chalitza from Reuven. So the chiddush of our Mishnah is that since Leah made Rachel an Eshesach, which means now she's no longer really a tzara, she's really like an erva, but we're going to call her the tzara of the erva. So Rachel, the tzara, the original tzara, now has her own tzara. So this is a tzara's tzara. So not only can Rachel not do yibum with Reuven because she still holds on to this original status of being an erva, but the same way Leah as an erva made Rachel a tzaras erva, so too Rachel, who is an erva now, the erva of Eshesach, makes Dinah a tzaras erva, and this actually continues. I've had a bigger whiteboard.
Sorry.
This continues down the road, meaning Levi, Yehuda,
The Rachel by
Yisachar,
Levi is
Zvulun. So
the
now,
same one as Shimon.
what's that?
That's what I was going to
Say again.
Leah married the Leah.
Leah
Shimon-
married
Shimon's Leah?
Shimon, and Leah's done.
Gotcha.
It's the same Rachel.
Right. That's what I was saying.
Rachel's the one who goes from here to here.
Right.
Now, so again, let's say there would be a fourth brother, Yehuda, right? And Yehuda's married to Miriam. And Yehuda goes and does yibum with Levi's dead wife, Levi, his dead brother's wife, Dinah. So Dinah's now a co-wife with Miriam, two people who never even maybe met Reuven, never met Shimon, right? They might be two babies who knows? It could be years later. But the point is, there's this sort of like poison that the Leah had as an erva, got into Rachel. Rachel shoved it into Dinah. Dinah will stick it into Miriam. Miriam will stick it into Batsheva. Batsheva will stick it into Basia. Meaning that erva just continues no matter what, because every single time the next brother that we're talking about has another wife and does the yibum, he's bringing effectively an Eshesach, which is an erva, into the relationship. Okay.
If let's assume that everything is normal and Levi, well, let's say like Leah is not Reuven's daughter, so
Okay.
So Leah
So not an erva here.
not an erva. Now Rachel and Leah fall to Reuven, and Reuven decides to marry both in
You
Yibum.
can't.
You can't.
Okay, so that's the question. The question is,
You do it with one, and the other one becomes an Eshesach.
right? So Yibum applies specifically to only one wife and
It-
not two.
No, what Yibum applies to, it's a good question. It applies to the bias,
Right.
and the way you take care of your obligation to the bias is with one woman. and the rest of the bias then becomes
Falls under
becomes-
that.
So the
It's
question is
to
why
protect Shimon. It's not to protect Rachel and Leah. It's
Yeah.
to give Shimon a bias. So
Right.
once-
So the question is, if why is it that theoretically Shimon will have a bigger bias if Reuven married
Doesn't matter.
Moab?
We're not interested in the size of his bias.
Not interested.
No, we're concerned for the continuation of his bias.
So okay, so now let's say he does.
And remember,
Did he
what we're
do it
doing in
Isser?
remember what we're
Nature's High?
1 second. What we're doing in Yibum
Yeah.
is usser. The Torah is providing us with let's call it a spade, a loophole. It's basically saying, generally speaking, what we're suggesting you do here, super usser. Hashem
Right.
said in this tiny little pipe where he says this little tiny little nothing, he says right here,
Yeah.
that's where you get to do this thing that is otherwise a major problem.
Right.
So we're not going to do it 7 times. We're going to do it once,
Right.
and only once if all of the stars align.
And we have a loophole on the loophole.
Right.
Yes.
Which is unusual.
So the
Correct.
question is, if he married both, did he do an
He can't marry
Isser
both.
of Eishes Av?
Yes, the second one is an
The
Eishes.
second one is an Eishes Av. Okay.
Yeah. That is the exact same idea what we just were saying here. Very good. Okay, now with that understanding, it says the Gemara, Michti. Michti is the Gemara saying, let's investigate. Yeah. So we have this Mishnah teaching this halacha that we just explained, that you have the erva, the tzaras erva, the tzaras tzara, v'chein ad ha'olam. Says the Gemara Michti. Kula me achos isha yalfina. Now the pasuk says by achos isha. Achos isha is the erva of being with your wife's sister. The pasuk over there, I'll read it inside. The pasuk says, the isha el achosa, a woman and her sister. La isikach, don't take the sister, meaning you're already married to your wife, right? Don't marry now the sister. Litzror, and what you'll be doing if you should marry her is you'll be creating a situation of litzror, which we'll call a tzara, but legalos ervas, it's considered a gilei arayis relationship, this second marriage. Aleha b'chayeha, we'll see what that means. The b'chayeha here is important. This is the special Torah's dispensation that specifically when you're discussing the sister of your wife, if your wife dies, you're now allowed to be with her. Meaning the gilui arayis only exists while your wife's alive. That's the pasuk by achos isha. Says the Gemara, Michti, kulu me achos isha yalfinan. Right? Meaning we know, and we'll see this later on in today's Gemara, the entire din of the Mishnah, right? The halacha that each and every one of these people in the Mishnah, right, are going to have this halacha. It was all learned out from achos isha. We'll get to the Gemara later on where we learn it out, that it patters, that the erva, there's no yibum, and that since there's no yibum, there's a tzara. That all stems from the halacha of achos isha. So ask the Gemara, why does the Mishnah start with bito? We're discussing for the first half of today's daf the order of the Mishnah's cases. Why are the 15 arayos that are listed in the order that they're listed? Remember, we have the 3 first ones are bitoi. The second 3 are also a sort of form of bito. Just the first 3 are from his side, and the second 3 are from his wife's side. And then we start going into, I think, mother-in-law and the mother-in-law's extension, mother-in-law's mother, father-in-law's mother. And then after that, I think we go into
Interesting question. I don't go on a tangent, but like
all
like
Masechtas.
why it's
All Masechtas will start off.
Oh,
This was the 4th parak, we wouldn't be having this conversation. That's the reality. But all Masechtas, it seems, always will have, most of the times, minyana de reisha lamute mai, minyana de save lamute mai, but it won't always necessarily come off in the middle of a Masechta. Those, even Tosafos, and you'll notice very often, not always, but very often, Tosafos will limit those types of questions where he'll do like, why are we making the drush on a hay here and not on the hay there, whereas in a pasuk parak later on they don't. Although they'll sometimes do that as well. But
Some people say those sugyas were written by the Rabbanan Savarai, who were kind
Yeah,
of after the Amorai,
Could be,
but they
yeah.
were focusing on the last arrangement.
that could be, yeah. Okay, so Michli, Kula me'achos ishal yalfinan, since all of the list in the Mishnah, that they make they ruin the Yibum. The Erva is a problem of Yibum. Where they learn from Achos Isha. And if they learn from Achos Isha, ask the Gemara, shouldn't it not be the first one listed in the Mishnah? Listen to Achos Isha Bereisha. And then the Gemara says, V'chi tema no. The order is not based on what it's learned out from, but rather it's from something else. Tana chumrei nakat. Meaning to say, the list of 15 starts with the most strict of the arayas relationships moving down to the bottom. Well, that's immediately going to be a problem because kalasai at the end, the last one mentioned, has the second strictest form of misa, the chayiv skila for that. That's certainly worse than the ones that only have a chayiv prisus, right? So that's clearly just right at the outset. That's a problem. It says the Gemara, maybe you'll have a havamina that the discussion in the Mishnah should be listed from the most stringent to the least stringent, right? It says the Gemara, and how will that make sense? Because the first one that's being discussed is bitai for Reb Shimon he to Amr Sreifa Chamura, meaning to say that a bitai is going to be besreifa, and he'll hold that Sreifa is the right. So there's different opinions as to which one of the 4 misos bezdin, right? You can killed the chenek, the sreifa, the herek, chenek, sreifa, or skila. Right? We don't have to discuss what the specifics are. So there's different opinions as to whether sreifa or skila is going to be which one of those are considered more common.
Worst. Yeah.
Which one is considered the
Which one's the one with the lead?
What do you get if you sleep with what you call it?
I don't want that.
A bas, meaning there's a whole thing. If there's a bas kohen, so if the person the person that sleeps with the bas kohen, does he get skila or sreifa? And there's a whole
No, but Baskoyin, who's an Eshizishim.
yeah. So the bas kohen gets sreifa, but we don't make.
Gemara Sanhedrin.
I think it's either Machos or. But anyway, so the question is, we don't. If there is a proof that skila is
Yeah, it's
less.
a conversation. I mean, you're referencing an entire sugya. I mean,
Right.
it could be that it's part of it. That what you're saying is true. But it's recognized as a massive machlekes tanaim about
Right.
which one's the most common. I mean,
Right.
maybe there's a proof like that. And I'm not sure. I don't remember the Gemara so well. But
Yeah.
yeah. So Reb Shimon has an opinion there that Sreifa is the most chamer.
Yeah.
So if Sreifa is the most chamer, we'd be then saying Bita, which is Bisreifa. We know Bita is Bisreifa. So we'd be saying that no, the explanation of our mission is we're starting off with Sreifa because the Sreifa is the most chamer. Ask the Gemara. Ihachi lisni chamoisa bereisha. So then chamoisa should be listed first. Why? Because where is Sreifa learned from? Chamoisa. The ikar Sreifa bechamoisa ksiva. If you take a look in the pasuk of Chamaisai, and I printed this out. If anyone has any interest in this, it was very helpful for me when I was learning the Gemara. I went and put the psukim all together.
Yeah.
I can make some copies. It basically just has all of the psukim. As we're going to
What's
come up, just a list of all the psukim of the parsha and Achrei Mos. We're going to constantly be coming back to this throughout the Masechta.
I'd
all
like
of the
it,
different
and I'd also
psukim.
like a copy of your cheat sheet.
You got it.
I thought you blew that up and typed it out.
No, that would be great. That would be awesome. I don't have the time. I don't know. I can give it to you. You can type fast. And then the bottom are the psukim by Yibam and Chalitza. Just helpful to have rather because I have an old Gemara that doesn't have the psukim on the side, and so therefore I needed it. So, okay, see the way. So what does the pasuk say by Chamaisai? Chamaisai says, let's find Chamaisai. I had it here before. Don't. Yeah, I don't have the pasuk here. You guys have the pasuk for Chamaisai on the side there? Does the Gemara say?
Maybe the Steinsaltz bring it.
Good nice. Okay, so I don't see it. Thank you. Yeah, I don't have that one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to update my list. But okay, yeah. So you see that the Iker Sreifa is ksiva by Chamosa, mother-in-law.
Mhm.
So sex with a mother-in-law is punished by death. It's punished by death. It's punished by Sreifa. And so therefore, if the whole reason why the list in the Mishnah is going from most stringent to least stringent, and you're saying Sreifa is the most stringent, so we start with Bita, doesn't it make sense then to at least start with the one that where Sreifa is learned out from? So the Gemara says, Va'od, Basa Chamaisai, after Chamaisai, what should be? Listing Kalasai. Kalasai is also, after you're done with all of the Sreifas, you should list Kalasai, which is Beskila. Right? Meaning, why is Kalasai all the way at the end? Like I mentioned earlier, Kalasai is your daughter-in-law. So the bus is Sreifa Skila Chamura, because after Sreifa comes Skila, and then Cherig and Henek, and then Cherig and Henek.
Yeah.
We use
Cherig
the word kala to mean bride, but in the Mishnah it almost always means your daughter-in-law.
Yeah, always. Yeah, almost always. Yeah. Ella. So the Maris now comes off of the idea that we're moving in order of stringency. That's not the discussion over here. Ella, Bita, what's the reason why it's first? Now the Gemara says a different svara. Kivan da asi midrasha, since Bita is learned from drasha, and we'll explain what this means in a second. The Bita is learned from a drasha, and a drasha is considered a chashuv thing versus being explicitly mentioned in the Torah, right? Why? Because there's a Torah Shabbal Peh component to it. So therefore, the people of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, let's say, decided to make the list the way he did. He wanted to put the first thing that's mentioned there, something that comes from a drasha. It's like he wanted to put the first thing, something that comes from a drasha, not something that's coming from something that's explicit in the Torah. Yeah. And now again, we'll see in a moment exactly what the drush of Bita is. Yeah.
There's no pasuk in the Torah that says
There is, but not. So part of the explanation over here will be we're going to discuss what type of Bita we're talking about, but we'll get there in a second. Kivin da asimi drasha chavivale, and let's just first figure that out. It says the Gemara. 1 second, I don't get it. Every single one of the dinim in the Mishnah is kulunami midrasha asu, meaning there's two things. One thing is that what we're saying is that Bita as an erva is learned from a drasha. Then the Gemara says, but 1 second, every one of the 15 arayas in the Mishnah that they're pattering by Yibam, that's learned out, we just said 2 seconds ago, from Achosisha. We learned it out from Achosisha. We'll get to this on Amid Beis. So ask the Gemara, everything in the Mishnah is coming out from drasha. Why is Bita any better than the rest of the Mishnah? Says the Gemara, no. Nehidel inyan yibum asin midrasha.
Achos Isha is a midrash, clearly.
Achos Isha as an erva. There's two things. Is this woman an erva? And then is this erva pater from yibum? Those are two different
And we're going
things.
to see
So
drushes.
says the Gemara, Bito is learned out as an erva from a drasha. And the Gemara is now saying, but what I don't understand, Achos Isha and all of those other ones are also midrasha. Not that they're actually an erva, but that they're pater from yibum. Meaning, if the whole reason why you're putting the first one in the Mishnah is because if there's a drasha associated with the din, well, there's a drasha associated with all the dinim in the Mishnah. So the Gemara says, you're right. Nehida le'inyan yibum asin midrasha, the halacha that this erva makes no yibum, that is learned out from drasha, because it's only said by Achos Isha, and then we expand it to all of the other arayas. So that is midrasha. But ikar isurayu behed yaksibuhu. But I can point to a pasuk in the Torah that tells me you're not how to be with your wife's sister. Meaning that is not a drasha. Their existence as an erva is meforish in the Torah. Whereas bitai, ikar isura midrasha. That your daughter is an erva is only learned to midrasha. It's not explicit in the Torah. And now is the right time to ask your question. Daughter is not written in the Torah? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? So Gemara says like this. Well, let's first explain what's the drasha. The Amarava Amarli Rav Yitzchak bar Abdimi. The following drush is the drush that teach me bitai. Asya hina hina, but Asya zima zima. Now the Gemara doesn't speak out the drush, so I'm going to speak it out outside. There's a pasuk. The pasuk says, pasuk is in, it's in Achrei Mos. It's in pasuk Yitzayin Parak Yitches. Pasuk says as follows. Okay, ready? We have two psukim. We have the pasuk Ervas Bas Bincha, the nakedness of the daughter of your son. So that's your granddaughter from your son. Oy Bas Bitcha, the granddaughter from your daughter. Loy Segala, don't reveal it. Ervason, don't reveal the erva. Ki ervascha heina. So the pasuk says heina over there. So it's telling you who's aser, your granddaughter, meaning your granddaughter through your son and your granddaughter through your daughter. It doesn't mention anything about your actual daughter. It just says the granddaughter. Now we have to know, what is that pasuk talking about? Right now there's no context. There's another pasuk. This pasuk says, Ervas Isha, the nakedness of your wife, Ubita, and her daughter, Loy Segala. So now we do mention the daughter. It's your wife's daughter. Now, your wife's daughter, by definition, is also your daughter. By definition, if it's your wife's daughter, now, it could be that she brought a daughter in from somewhere else, but the isser to be with your wife's daughter would include both daughters she's had with other husbands and daughters she's had with you, which would then mean that I have a mefurish pasuk telling you that your daughter's an heir. So what is the Gemara talking about? It's coming from a drasha. So the answer is that the drasha clearly is only covering a daughter that you have with your wife, who you're married to. What if she's not your wife? What if you had a mistress, which the Torah will refer to as anusah? So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have had to rape her. It means a woman outside of your marriage. When we say bito me anusah, so we do not have to assume the man has forcefully had sex with this woman. Although if he did, she would also be his daughter. But the case of bito me anusah, so the daughter from your anusa, just means not your wife. That's
we
the
want
way.
to discuss why it says in the Torah your wife's daughter instead of like
For this reason, exactly. It's specifically in order to include all forms of a daughter that come from a woman who you're married to or who herself was married to someone else, right? So therefore, your daughter from her or her daughter that she married you with, those daughters are all usher to you. That pasuk continues, then says, Es bas bina, her granddaughter, meaning and your granddaughter, Ves bas bita, and her granddaughter and your granddaughter. So I have a pasuk lesikach, and what does it say at the end of that pasuk? Legalos ervasa she'ara heina zimahi. So I have a pasuk here that says heina by bito from your wife, and now I have this other pasuk telling me about my granddaughters, which doesn't mention my daughter, and that says heina also. So we understand that pasuk to be talking about from the anusa, right? Except by anusa we only have granddaughters mentioned; the actual daughter is not mentioned. So the one case of the six that's not covered mefurish in the Torah is the daughter from your anusa. The daughter from your wife, that's in the pasuk later. The granddaughters, both from the son and the daughter from your wife, that's also mentioned in the pasuk later. The pasuk earlier only mentions granddaughters. So that's 5 out of the 6. What happened to your actual daughter from your anusa? A man has a mistress, has a child with the mistress. That woman, the daughter, is that his daughter? The Torah doesn't seem to say so. However, the Torah used the word in the first pasuk, talking about anusa, by your mistress, where it said the word heina. Hey, nun, hey. Really, not really an extra word. There's a Gzeira Shava from that Hena to the Hena that's in the pasuk of Yitzayin, which is talking about daughters from your wife. It also says Legalazer Vasa Sha'ara Hena Zimahi. That Hena connects the two psukim to say the following. Just like over here, it referred to a bito, even though it doesn't mention bito above, the fact that it mentions bito later on, it tells us to include bito above as well. So bito as an isser is learned from drasha, because it's not explicit in the Torah. Now the zima is coming to teach me that not only is bito that we just learned from a drasha usser, but it has the same punishment as the rest of these ladies, meaning they're all bekaris, or whatever bito would be b'sreifa. Now how do we know that? That's the zima. The pasuk in Yitzayin that I just quoted by the daughter of your wife, it says Shara Hena Zimahi. It says Zima. It's a disgusting sex act, meaning it's a Zima. It's a disgust. Now that pasuk of Zima here also shows up in the parsha of I think Chamoso. I forget exactly where the other pasuk shows up, but the point is it shows up in another place, and from there we learn that it's going to be B'sreifa. It says the Gemara. Let's see inside. Says the Gemara. So now you have this drasha. So what's the Gemara really pointing out now? It's explaining that the first thing in the Mishnah is from a drasha, and bita makes sense. Okay, so we've established this concept. The drasha, the more drasha oriented it is, the earlier it goes. Then listi la'achos yisha levasof. Well, then shouldn't achos yisha, which is now this all of a sudden granddaddy of all sources of explicit mentioning in the Torah, this should go at the absolute bottom of the Mishnah. So what's it doing in the middle of the Mishnah? So the Gemara says no. You're right. Really, it does belong at the end. But the order of the Mishnah is going where Bito started. Why? Because it's Asli Midrash. And once we mention Bito, we're going to mention all of the other types of Bito. So it says the Gemara, why don't we have Achos Ishto all the way at the end? Because no, the reason why Achos Ishto is mentioned where it is because we've started mentioning forms of sibling ervas, and so once we mention sibling ervas, this is also a sibling type of an erva. It's a sibling of your wife. Ask the Gemara, v'lisna lahayt babalabasa. So take the entire group of sisters and put it at the end, whether it's the wife of your brother or it's whichever one it is. Not the wife of your brother. Sorry, your achoso me'imo, the sister of your wife. All of these cases of siblings, put them all the way at the end in order to make achos ish to go at the end because she's the one that's the most explicit in the Torah. It's not midrasha. So the Gemara says, you're right. Now we're going to come off of the idea that we're going in order of what's the most chomer to the most kal. We're going to go away from the idea of what's midrasha, what's not midrasha. We're going to come up with a third paradigm for the order in the Mishnah.
And none of those were ever so plausible because the Mishnah looks like it's arranged
in some sort of subject. Yeah.
Family.
Now,
connection.
we're not going to completely come off of it, at least according to Rashi. It's not clear in the Gemara this way, but you are correct. Meaning, Ela Tana Kurve Nakat. Rather, what did the Mishnah do? The order here we're discussing here is how close you are to these ladies. Meaning, now again, not necessarily expressed by the punishment you would get from being with them, but rather from.
So why are we asking why is that so important?
Say again?
Why is that so important?
It's not that it's so important. We're just. What's that?
In terms of how close they are to.
We're just trying to come up with a logical explanation for the order.
Mishnayos were memorized, so having the logical sequence through the daughters. That's what they're really saying.
Not only that, they were arranged in a way for you to learn.
Right.
Yeah.
Remember.
So says the Gemara. So let's explain it. First, Tana Bito, Yibas Bito, Yibas Bno, which we now, by the way, know is talking specifically about Me'anu Saso. That's, by the way, Rabbi, to answer your question of why when we read the Mishnah, we read Bito to mean Bito Me'anu Saso. Like, where is it? This Gemara is what's pushing us to do that. So first was mentioned Bito Me'anu Saso, which is the closest of the relatives, meaning to say these women are only related to him. They're not related to his wife. They're related to his mistress, but not to his wife. Yeah? So the krove atzmo, these are his krovim, these are his relatives. The ID de tana shlosha doras lamata dite. Once we're mentioning the three, meaning his daughter and two granddaughters that are his only, tana nami shlosha doras lamata dida. Let's mention the three that are under his wife, meaning her daughter and her two granddaughters, which are also in Eretz. So now we got the six. It says the Gemara, the ID de tana shlosha doras lamata dida, tana shlosha doras lamalab dida, meaning her mother, which is your mother-in-law, her mother's mother, and her father's mother, which are now 9, right? So now we've gotten yourself, your wife below, and your wife above. And once we got your wife above, v'tana achoso v'achos imo dekrove atzmo, right? Meaning, once we're done with you and your wife, so now we expand out a little bit. We're going to go into the sibling type relationships where we talk about achoso, your sister. Again, sister mi imo, obviously not sister mi av. The achos imo and your mother's sister, the krove atzma. And once we're mentioning sisters, because even though achos ishta really doesn't belong there, because it's not really a problem of sister, it's a problem of wife. But once we're mentioning siblings, we'll mention that there because achos is part of it. So that gets us to, I believe, 12, right? 12. Meaning we have three left. Now the three that are remaining are Eishes Achiv Shalayahel Be'olamo. We have Eishes Achiv Me'imo and Kalaso. Kalaso is daughter-in-law. We have your brother's wife, but the brother from your mother, not the brother from your father, not someone who has Yibam, and the brother from your father who was born after you died. So you weren't alive at the same time. Those three cases are in the Mishnah, and really we don't have an explanation for which one of those three need to go next. Bedinu says the Gemara delictum ala kalaso, we should put kalaso first. And here's where I'm mentioning Rashi. Rashi explains the reason is because we'll still hold on to the old reasoning of kalaso is the most stringent. It's the one that has, of the three remaining ones, it's the only one that's chayiv misa. The other two are only chayiv kares. But that's not in the Gemara. The other Rishon say different shot there, different mefarshim. But either way, it's better. The Gemara says it would make more sense to put kalaso first. We don't. He says mekami eishes achim shlehoy ba'ilamo, and parenthetically the other eishes achim me'imai. Why? Deloy mishum kurva hu dasira. Meaning all of these are not mishum kurva, right? Meaning kalasa is a daughter-in-law. Eishes achiv is a through marriage. These are all through marriage. He says there's a bidinhu that kalasa should go first. Rashi says again because it's a stricter thing. But once we were talking about sibling associated, we stayed within a ton of Eishes Achim and also Eishes Achim Me'imo. The Hadar Tana Kalasa, which has literally nothing other than it being a stringent Avera to go. Okay, so Lamaisa, that's the end of the discussion in terms of the order of the 15. We started talking about that maybe the order has something to do with the fact that it's a stringency issue. Then we thought maybe no, it's not a stringency issue. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that what's learned out from drasha versus what's learned out explicitly. We saw that's not the case. So then the Gemara said maybe it has something to do with which one you're closest to, and that's the maskana. That it's what's you start with you, then your wife, then below her, then we went above her. Then once we were talking about that, we jumped to sister because it's kravei atzma. Once we discussed sisters, we mentioned the other types of sibling-related associated things, and we end up with kolasa, which is the least associated. So says the Gemara. That's the order of the Mishnah. Says the Gemara Weiler. Another sort of administrative question around the Mishnah in terms of the language that's used. But sometimes these language conversations are just language conversations. Sometimes the language conversations undergird a much more fundamental concept around how to understand the mitzvah that we're being discussed. Meaning to say to someone like we saw in Chagiga, to talk about a shlishi. I don't scare people talking about shlishis and revis again, but we call a shlishi if it's truma puzzle, but a shlishi that's kagdish we call it tameh. The words they're not just convention. They mean something. To call some hegdish tameh, it's saying that it can be matama something else. Whereas calling hegdish puzzle is saying it can't be matama something else. So to over here, the words we're going to use in the Mishnah of asuros or peturos might matter. They have different implications about the halacha. Meaning when we're saying that yibum, which is normally a halacha between a brother and his dead brothers and the widows of his dead brother, if we find a scenario where those two women don't have a halacha of yibum, do we say they're peturos or do we say they're asuros? Right? Because again, if they're pater, they're aser. Because then they're just an eshesach, right? So we have to figure out which words used. Now our Mishnah says these women that are arayos, they're an erva, they're peturos mina chalitza mina yibum. They're pater from chalitza and they're pater from yibum, which means to say, normally when I say, oh, you're pater, you don't have to do it. But you could if you want to. You pater. Rabbi, I'm not sure if I daven. That's in Shabbos. It's a different thing. If let's say I asked the rabbi, I'm not sure if I daven Mariv. Am I chayiv to daven again? No, you pater. Can I? Sure you can. Here it's not so clear, right? If you write the word pater, that's a confusing statement. Pturo sounds like you're pater, but right, the chiddush by Shabbos is that we actually say pater aval aser. Normally we don't say that.
Marv's not a.
Well, I'm big Mariv, but really it could have been Shabbos.
I'm saying,
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Daven
That's
Shabbos.
what I'm saying.
It might be
Different thing. Okay. I just picked an example of something that's super light.
Oh, good.
Rabbi, I'm not sure if I made the bracha on this.
Right.
Safi darabanan. You know now that you're not allowed to because of a different reason.
Can't do it.
Yeah. Okay. So says the Gemara. Says the Gemara like this. Umayir Yeditana Paitros, Lisni Isris. Why did it say in the mission of Paitros? Meaning, why did it say an Ereva and her tzaros and her tzaros Peturos mi chalitza min ayivim atzayf ha'olam? It should have said Lisni Isris. And here I'm going to explain it. It's not clear in the Gemara. The Gemara's suggestion is that it should say Isris liyabe, because that's the only thing that's usher. It's not going to be usher to take off the guy's shoe and spit on the floor. Nothing wrong with spitting. Nothing wrong with taking off a shoe. The only thing that's usher here is the sexual act with your brother's wife. That's a problem, right? So if an erva makes there no mitzvah yibum, because an erva is an erva, and that makes the tzara pater from erva yibum. Well, once you're pater from yibum and you're a brother, you're ipso facto it's usher now. So says the Gemara, say listening usher, say that it's usher to be miyabim these women. So the Gemara says no. If I would have said osirus, there would have been an unintended consequence. Itana osirus, if I would have said that the yibum is usher, havyamina the exact opposite. I would have said, yeah, what's usher? You're not allowed to do yibum. Havyamina usher liyabim. Aval michlatz chalza. I might think you could do chalitza.
And have to do chalitza.
And then right, exactly. Meaning the way to say it really is it's usher to do yibum, but there's still a zika. You still got to get rid of that zika that happened when he died. Meaning we've been explaining for 3 days already. And we've become pretty, I think, comfortable around the lumdus of understanding what's going on. So it may sound a little funny to hear this, but who says that the way we've explained it is really how it should be? Says the Mishnah, says the Gemara. Maybe if I would just say in the Mishnah Asuros, I would think that really there's always a Zika. And Zika never goes away. You're not allowed to do Yibam. Why? Because she's your erva. And the Tzara also, from the Torah's pasuk, tells me that she's also you're not allowed to do it with. Doesn't mean that Zika goes away.
Then how could she marry somebody else?
She's not allowed to. She needs chalitza to do it. Well, this is the havamid of the. Maybe I would think she needs chalitza to go do it. You're saying no because you're living in the world of the maskana. But this is you're living in the world of the way we've explained it until now, which is in truth how it is. But the Gemara is trying to address. Had I said it this way, I might have made this faulty thinking. This faulty thinking is you would think you still need chalitza. You don't need chalitza.
And what the Gemara says is exactly what we say for an Issa D'Rabbanan.
Exactly, which is a good reason why you'd think that.
Yeah.
So says the Gemara, Kamash Milan, no, the Mishnah is teaching me the lashon of Peturos to teach me your putter. Says the Gemara, so say Velisni Asura Lachlos. You could fix that problem very simply.
Mm-hmm.
Just say in the Mishnah that they're Asuros Liyabem ve'Asuros Lachlots. Meaning to say, and therefore, of course, if you're atasur to do chalitza, it certainly means you don't need it, right? And it would accomplish everything. But the Gemara says, 1 second, Micah Ovid, the phraseology of saying that chalitza is asur doesn't make sense. What are you doing wrong when you do chalitza? You're taking off a shoe of a guy and you're spitting on the floor. Big deal. There's nothing asur on that unless it's what Shabbos. You can't do chalitza Shabbos anyway. So what's the problem? Yeah.
Why can't you do chalitza on Shabbos?
You're not supposed to do chalitza. It's a kinyan. You're not supposed to do kinyan on Shabbos.
Chalitza is the opposite of a kinyan. How can it be kinyan?
Well, she's being koina satzma.
Koina satzma. Okay.
My covet. So Gemara says, what do you mean? You're doing plenty. Alam alai, meaning why? Meaning it should be aser. Why? Meaning what? Says the Gemara, because let's say you were to say that you could do chalitza, right? Misyabemes, right? Im ata oimer chayletzes misyabemes. What's going to happen is that if you say to a woman that it's okay to do chalitza because there's no iser, well then we're going to assume most people were going to say, you did chalitza? Oh, I guess must be you could have done yibum if you wanted to, because that is actually the normal case. Normally, if someone's doing chalitza, it's because they're choosing not to do yibum. So if I see this lady doing chalitza with this guy, I'll assume, yeah, today she's choosing chalitza, but maybe tomorrow in a different scenario, the guy's going to do yibum. But you can't do yibum. Why? Because it's asura. So therefore, back to the question: why not just say oisrais? Why not just say in the Mishnah oisrais covers everything? And don't tell me that the language of oisrais doesn't apply, because it does apply. Because I want you to know that it's asur to do chalitza, meaning we're suggesting it should be asur to do chalitza, because we don't want to allow you to do chalitza, even though there's no purpose to it, because one might conclude from there that you could even do yibum. So the language of oisrais would make sense in the Mishnah. So we're back to the question. It says the Gemara, no, kiven the mamokim mitzvah, hu de asira tzara. Meaning it's only when there's a mitzvah yibum, the makom mitzvah is mitzvah yibum, that's when the tzara is aser, ushaloi b'makom mitzvah, and when there's a non-yibum situation, meaning 2 women married to a random guy, one of them happens to be your erva, sharia, the halacha is that it's, mutter, mishum hachi tani poitras, right? They're peturas from yibum. And again, let me just explain this outside. We've been discussing the concept of tzara and tzara in the context of Yibum, meaning Reuven and Shimon are brothers. Shimon dies, leaves over 2 wives. One of them is your relative. What's with the other lady? Meaning, what do you mean? What's with the other lady? Meaning, there's a mitzvah Yibum. Do you have a mitzvah Yibum with her or not? What if you just have 2 random people? You have Reuven and David. David is married to Reuven's daughter, and David has a second wife, right? Am I allowed to marry? Is Reuven allowed to marry David's other wife? So you might be like, what's the question? Of course, like, what's the big deal? Just because she shared a home with your daughter, right? So says the Gemara, if it had said in the Mishnah Oisris, let's read the new Mishnah the way the Gemara is suggesting. The following 15 ladies, Oisris Tzarais, with Tzarais, Ad Seifa Olam. Oisris implies that what's creating the Isser in our Mishnah? The fact that they were in a home with an erva. That's not true, but that's what it would imply. The reason why the tzara is aser is because once the erva is pater from yibum, well, now the bias has a problem in the zika, so she herself is pater in yibum. So why is she aser? Because she's pater. It's because she's pater from yibum that what is she now? The tzara. She's an eshes ach, doesn't have a mitzvah. Since she's an eshes ach, doesn't have a mitzvah, that's why she's aser. She's not aser because she's the tzara of an erva. She's aser because since she has no mitzvah, she's a regular eshes ach. So it's got to use a lashon of pater, because without that language, if all I would have said is aser, I would incorrectly conclude that what's going on in the Mishnah, that there's some magical connection between the erva and the tzara. The erva makes the tzara aser. You can't catch erva.
It wasn't a brother.
You can't catch it. You can't create new ervas.
Even if it wasn't a brother.
If it wasn't a brother, if it was David instead of Shimon, and David died, or even he didn't die. Let's say David divorced both his wives. So now the lady that was married to David, that's not your daughter, you would have had a havmina from our Mishnah that she's also because she's married to another erva of yours, which is obviously not true. The only reason why the tzara is also is because she is now an eshes ach without a mitzvah. It's okay. It's cold. Yeah. So says the Gemara, that's the reason why we say poitrus. Okay, so we've just solved a second administrative question in our Mishnah of poitrus and isis, but now we've just revealed the yesod. Again, the yesod that we were explaining in the Hakdama, but again, if you started the daf yesterday without any Hakdama, this is a tremendous yesod. Understanding that the reason why the tzara is aser isn't because she's married to a guy who's also married to an erva, and she somehow caught that erva from her. That there's no such thing. The reason why she's aser, it's a little bit indirect. The erva that she's co-married with, just since the erva doesn't have a mitzvah yibum, well, that erva makes this house now have a problem. The zika is faulted. The entire zika is affected. So that means there's no zika on the other lady also. Why? Because she has no mitzvah. She has no mitzvah.
We're not brothers.
Exactly.
It's difficult because originally when the bun was created, meaning if you married Rachel first, right, like Shimon married.
And when the what was created?
Meaning when the first marriage was created, when the first marriage was created, so there was a zika bond, and then you added another wife, which made it possible. Meaning Reuven or whoever it is can't marry the other person. That doesn't mean that the zika is now because Leah has entered the house. That original zika, if you understand zika as being originally, you can't mess with that.
I'm not following the question. Well, ask me after. I don't want to stay. We have lots to cover. Yeah. Okay. Says the Gemara. Okay, so that's the second administrative question. So now the Gemara has a third question. Why did it say in the Mishnah when it says Peturos, why did it mention Chalitza first? Really, isn't the mitzvah? I mean, if you read the Psukim, it's pretty much mashma from the Torah that Hashem's Ratzon is to do Yibam. Just Narvas, if you can't do the Yibam, you don't want it, you don't like her, whatever, then okay, Chalitza, you even see from the language, there's a little bit of guilt. She goes to the gate, the city, and says, this is what this guy does who doesn't do the thing that he's supposed to do of make him the house of his brother. So clearly Yibam is supposed to be done first. Says the Mishnah, first just mention Yibam, that's the thing that matters. Says the Gemara, no. The answer is pretty obvious. Meaning if all it would mention is Yibam on its own, this Havmina is really a little weak Havmina. Meaning obviously we need to mention both. So okay, Kamash Milan that what? But I guess this is the point. Kamash Milan that no. I need both because this is a very important side in Yevamos. We're going to see this again and again and again and again. If someone has a din, this is really the concept of Zika. Meaning, if a person is chayiv in Yibum, then they're chayiv in Chalitza. If they're not chayiv in Yibum, they're not chayiv in Chalitza. Meaning, to say this in a little bit more of a yeshivish way, right? The din Chalitza is noiveya. It comes from the mitzvahs Yibum. If there's no mitzvahs yibum, chalitza goes away. Now again, it's possible, we'll see in the Mishnah we saw yesterday, that you can have on the Torah level a situation where you're chayiv in yibum and therefore chayiv in chalitza, but midrabanan you're not allowed to do yibum, so therefore midrabanan you don't need a chalitza, but min Torah you still do. That's a different thing. What we're saying over here is that in the operating system of yibum, if when the brother dies, the Torah to you says, don't worry, no mitzvahs yibum, what they mean to say is you're entirely removed from the story of yibum, and even chalitza therefore is not needed. And that's the chiddush of the Mishnah by teaching both. Ask the Gemara, 1 second. You haven't answered my question about the order, right? For listening mina yibum u mina chalitza, meaning change the order around to make yibum go first. Gemara says, or inami mina chalitza lechuda, or just teach that your pturas mina chalitza, right? Which again is a little bit of a strange question because really the answer to that is obvious. The Gemara says, Abba Sholhi. There's a machlekes later on, Tanoi, machlekes Abba Shol and Chachamim. Which one are you supposed to do first? We have been discussing Yibum as the ideal and Chalitza as the B'diavad. Abba Shol learns it the opposite. Abba Shol understands that really the ideal is to do Chalitza, but his reasoning is what I think for most of us would make a lot of sense. Says Abba Shol, Abba Shol the Amr mitzvahs Chalitza kedemus l'mitzvahs Yibum. He says Chalitza goes first. If you just take a quick look at the Rashi on the bottom of the page, second to last Rashi on the daf. Abba Shol the Perak HaCholitz, in about 40 days we'll get to him. Abba Shol Omer, Abba Shol says, Hakonis Yivimto, a person who makes Yibum with his Yevama. L'shum Noi, if he's doing it because he thinks she's pretty, or because he wants to have a pretty wife or whatever. L'shum Ishus, or like he really likes her, he wants to be married to her. Yeah. He's Ki'ilu Poigea Be'erva. It's it's almost like a quasi being over on a major erva. The Korov Be'enai, and Abba Shol says, it's close in my mind. He says, so much so that you got to be careful. Meaning, and this touches on what I was saying before, that if the Torah says you can't be with your brother's wife, the Torah says you can't be with your brother's wife. The mitzvah yibum is under a certain circumstance you're allowed to do it. It's like, imagine I said to you on Shabbos of an 8th day of a Milah that you're going to start to cut up, you're going to start to, you do the Milah and then you say, hey, I got the scalpel in my hand already. Let me see, what else can I go start cutting up? You have to keep it limited to only that is mutter. The second you even inch past that, even slightly, you're dealing with major serious issues. So that means that since the whole purpose of Yibum is in order to build your brother's home, that has to be your kavanah. Abba Shol has a halacha that your kavanah is here also. Some Rishonim discuss, some Achronim discuss, is Abba Shol having a mitzvah srichas kavanah, mitzvah ain't srichas kavanah conversation, or is it a unique thing within Yibum? That's a discussion we'll get to on Daf Lamed Tes.
This is so schwer.
We have to hold off on all of the things that are majorly schwer and only focus on those things that are only slightly schwer because they make the pshat not good. So we focus on the things that I would consider more like Iyun stuff.
Yeah.
I love to sit and talk about it, but we have to be careful not to sacrifice the pace because it's
Okay, but it sounds like Abba Shol is not saying in the Torah it was better, but
yes, he's saying practically speaking.
Today,
right. That's a good point. Correct. Yes, correct. Okay, says the Gemara. Minyana de Reisha l'mutei mayim, minyana de Seif l'mutei mayim. Minyana de Reisha l'mutei mayim, minyana de Seif l'mutei mayim. Meaning, whenever the Mishnah lists off things, it says 15. 15 implies not 16, and not 17, and not 18. There's also a minyana de Seifa. What's the minyana de Seifa? Anyone?
It was Sefer over the last night.
The last one is Kala.
So what's the minyana de Seifa?
Was there another count in the Mishnah?
So no, there wasn't. Well, there was technically, but really about something else. Meaning the list of 15, we say there's 2 exceptions, right? 15 tells me not 16, and there's another minyana.
Where?
So there's no actual number. Rashi says it's when it says Hare Elu, the Hare Elu in the Mishnah, it's like it said another number. It's like it said 15 twice. It mentions the following, these 15, and then it says at the end, there's a line that says Hare Elu, when the Gemara says Ketzad, and at the end of that Ketzad, it said Hare Elu, Poitras, Taras, Taras. The Elu implies, what do you mention the 15 again? So it's like 15 twice. So the Gemara understands that both of those exceptions are coming to teach me something that doesn't belong in the Mishnah. Let's just remind ourselves, what is the Mishnah teaching me? The Mishnah is teaching me when you have an erva, there's no Yibum, and the erva makes a tzara, no Yibum, and therefore the tzara is tzara. Says the Gemara, what is these 215 exclusions? What are these 2 exclusions coming to tell me? They're coming to tell me cases that wouldn't fit into our Mishnah. What are those cases? Lamuti de Rabu de Rabasi. Gemara assumes you know Rav and Ravasi. Rashi tells us what they are. Doesn't explain it really very well, and I'll just say it outside. Rav and Ravasi, these are Gemaras on Daf Yud Aleph and Daf Yud Beis, major sugyas. We're about to, in the next 3 lines, we're going to drop reference to 4 sugyas, the tzara of 4 different types of women. Major discussion major discussion later on. What's the halacha for these tzaras? I'm going to mention them briefly because I don't think now is the time to delve into it too much. But Rav holds, we're talking about a tzaras sota. What happens again? I'll just set the case up. We could discuss the specifics. You have Reuven and Shimon, brothers. Yeah, Shimon is married to two ladies. One of them cheats on him, and she's found out to be a sota. But before he could divorce her, he dies. So you have a wife who's a sota and a wife who's not a sota, falling to Reuven. Now they're not an erva. Sota's not an erva. There's no reason why she should be patur from yibum, really, from the perspective of erva. So there's a discussion later on that since sota, the pasuk by sota talks about tuma, right? So since tuma and all of the arayas are referred to as tuma in the psukim, you see at the end over there, not an actual tuma, but don't be metam of the land when you do this. That's all different lashons of tuma. The Gemara later on has a drasha that takes the tummy to say that a sota is patur from yibum, and patur from yibum, patur from chalitza. So do we say that the tzara of such a woman is also patur? Meaning, the way we've been explaining it until now is that the bias of Shimon as he dies has to be betmimus. There has to be, everyone has to be kosher v'yosher. Well, now we're starting to see that that explanation in the beginning of Masechta works, and as you move through Yevamos, you have to figure out when that's true and when that's not. Meaning here you have a scenario where everyone's masking the sota does not have a din yibum, and yet at the same time there's a discussion later on. Do we say the same thing applies to her tzara? So we hold that no, the tzara is fine. The tzara has a din yibum. We're going to get to that. Why is there a din yibum? Meaning she's an eshes ach who has a tzara. She's the tzara of someone who's patur from yibum, not midrabanan. Min haTorah has no din yibum. That means there's someone in the bias of Shimon who has no yibum whatsoever, not because of an erva, for a different reason, but she's completely mufka. She's completely removed from the parsha of yibum. So why don't we say the way we've been explaining it until now? The simple way we've been explaining it, then that means all of the tzaras should be asur. That's not so clear. That's a machlekes later on. We'll get to it. It's a little bit of a deeper conversation. Now is not the point. It was just bringing up Rav over here to point out that there's an opinion of Rav who says that tzara, that tzara is meaning lemuute, meaning according to us, the halacha is that tzara is fine.
Yeah.
According to Rav, the tzara is not. Right. According to Rav, the tzara is a problem. Meaning he holds the din of our Mishnah would apply to the tzara sota as well. You might ask, so then according to Rav, why isn't she mentioned in the Mishnah? The Gemara is going to get to that. But okay, that's Rav. Says the Gemara, what's the other case? Ravasi. Very similar concept. It's a huge sugya. Tzaras islandus. Islandus is even a little bit harder to understand of why it doesn't belong in the Mishnah. What's an islandus? We said before, an islandus is a woman who never developed the sexual maturity. Let's assume we're talking about Reuven married a 23-year-old islandess, not one of these limafreya retroactive situations. He married a woman. He knows she's an islandess. He's happy to marry her, and he has another wife. No, an islandess is not chayiv and yibum. Meaning,
why would he marry an islandess?
Whatever.
Stop
Stop asking a women question. I have no freaking clue why he married her. He married her because he likes the way she looks. Whatever. Or she's good at cooking. Yeah. The point is that he's got two wives. One of them's an islandess, and the islandess is patur from a yibum. She's completely removed from the parsha of yibum. There is no mitzvah yibum by an islandess. There's no chayiv chalitza. No one argues with that. However, there's a discussion. What about the tzara of an islandess? Shimon dies, two wives. One's an islandess, and the other one, very similar case to what we just mentioned. Min haTorah, completely removed from the parsha of yibum, and yet at the same time, the tzara is chayiv and yibum and chalitza. At least that's the way we hold. Meaning we're going to exclude her from our Mishnah because she doesn't belong in our Mishnah. Because although she's patur from yibum and chalitza, her tzaras aren't, and our Mishnah is teaching us the halacha of tzaras and tzaras. So like us, we're coming to say that the two numbers in the Mishnah, meaning 15 and Harei Elu, meaning the repetitive of 15, those two things are coming lema'ute, these two cases. Why? Because according to us, they wouldn't belong in the Mishnah. Although the subject woman is patur from yibum and chalitza, her tzaros would not be. Therefore, it doesn't belong in our Mishnah. And all I'm just pointing out is, if you have a question as to why they don't, which would be an Eon question, we have to wait to Yud Aleph Yud Beis to get to it, because it's a major discussion. But from our Gemara over here, all we're saying is those are the two cases we're excluding. Okay. Says the Gemara, fine, that's wonderful according to everybody other than Rav and Ravasi. What about Rav and Ravasi themselves? They have a Mishnah. They're not Tanoim. They have to deal with our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says only 15. According to them, there should be at least 16, maybe 17. Depends if they agree to each other. Yeah? Says the Gemara, L'Ravu L'Ravasi L'Mutei Mai. According to them, what's the Pshat in the Mishnah? What's 15 coming to exclude? Meaning, according to them, it should be there.
They need to find one more thing.
Or potentially two.
Or
potentially two, right? If they both agree with each other, then they'll need to find two new cases.
Why two?
Because there's two exclusions in the Mishnah.
Oh, two exclusions.
Yeah. Now again, you can ask your question a little slightly better, which is, I don't get it. Doesn't 15 tell me not 16 and not 17 and not 18? Why do I have to say that there's two? Why isn't all of this excluded from 15? Toys asked the question. I don't really know the answer. Really,
it's formulaic.
Yeah.
Always does this.
And the Tosos will ask the question every time. Yeah. Okay. Says the Gemara. According to Rav and Rav Asi, who have these two cases, that they hold that tzaros are what? Going to be Paturas Mina Yibam, and they hold that the din of our Mishnah would apply even to a tzaras soto or a tzaras islandess. Says the Gemara. What are they going to read the Mishnah and say 15 is coming to exclude? So the Gemara says if they agree with each other, they need two cases. And then if they don't agree with each other, each one could just use the other one's non-case. Says the Gemara like this. So I'm just going to read it and then I'll explain it. And if they don't agree with each other, then each one of them can use one of the exceptions for that guy's din, right? Meaning, because if they don't completely agree with each other, then one of the exclusions will be Rav will exclude Ravasi's, Ravasi will exclude Rav's. Then which clearly you see the Gemara is not bothered that if, let's say, they don't agree with each other, right? Well, then each one of them are only going to be using the exclusion for one of Mam'enes or Machzor Shasai, meaning the other one's not. So obviously, even there, it'll mean both. Meaning, so the Gemara just means to say that we're just trying to do it in a like you said, a formulaic cheshbon over here. And I'm going to explain tzaras Mam'enes and tzaras Machzor Shasai in a second, but I just want to finish this part of the Gemara. Rav Asi lisninu. This is the obvious question. According to Rav and Rav Asi, each one of their own halachas, the din of the Mishnah applies to their case. Meaning tzaras aser. Tzaras aser. Says the Gemara, no, that's not true. Lafisha eina b'tzaras tzara. You can have a tzara. You can have Shimon married to two ladies. One of them is an islandess, or one of them is a sota, and the other one's her tzara. But what's that other woman? That woman is the tzara of a sota. Well, the tzara of a sota is also on Levi and is also on Shimon, is on Yehuda. Meaning our Mishnah, the Erva specifically with Reuven. But here, this is a global problem with any brother. So therefore, you'll never have the yibum happening with any of the tzaros. So therefore, there's no tzaros tzara. Since our Mishnah is discussing the unique scenario of not only that the erva is aser, the tzaras erva is aser, that tzara makes another tzara, that ad olam piece can't happen with the tzara sota, because the tzara sota, the sota is going to be aser on all of the brothers, right? From the Gzeres HaKasav. An islandess is going to be Pturim in a Yibam and a Chlitz on all the brothers, for Sarah is going to be Aser. So therefore, no one will ever do Yibam with anyone over there. So therefore, they completely go free. Therefore, that's the reason why it doesn't fit. But those opinions of Rav and Rav Asi later on we'll get to. So okay, let's just go back quickly. What is Tzaras Mam'enes and Tzaras Machzor Shasai? So again, these two as well. No, it's not difficult. Reuven and Shimon are married. Sorry, Reuven and Shimon are brothers. Shimon is married to two ladies. Now, one of the ladies that Shimon's married to, in our case here, instead of Leah being his daughter, we'll say Leah is a katana. Leah is 10 years old, and she is a Yisayma, meaning she's an orphan now, but her father passed away. And who married her off? Her brother, her mother, whatever it was. Meaning to say that Shimon is married to Leah only midarabanan. Min HaTorah, what is Leah? She's a pnuya. She's a single girl. Min HaTorah, she's not married. Midarabanan, they're married. So that means Min HaTorah, how many wives does Shimon have? One. Midarabanan, he has two. Right? Now, what happens? Shimon dies. Min HaTorah, the only one falls to Yibam is Rachel. Leah's not Min HaTorah, is married, his wife. So that would mean Reuven would have to do Yibam with Rachel. No problem. He could do Yibam, he could do Chalitza. But what do we say? We say that since there's another wife, right? What would be the halacha of Leah? Leah is a Ketana. She's only married with the Rabbanan. So the halacha is he could do Yibam with her, but the Yibam with her would only be with the Rabbanan. There's no Isurim here, right? So far, this is I'm just laying out the case. Now, he could do Yibam with Rachel, and if he did Yibam with Rachel, Shalom al Yisrael, he's got a new wife, Rachel, and Midrabanan Leah is also to be with him in the future, because Midrabanan it's an Eshesach, but Min HaTorah, she's whatever. So it gets a little bit more complicated. What if he did Yibam with the Ketana? Yibam with the Ketana is a massive sugya. We'll get to that later on as well. However, Leah, Kol's man, Shimon was alive, and as long as she's a Ketana, she had, as a Ketana, in this unique scenario, had the opportunity, if she wanted to, at any moment in time, say, this wedding that my brother set up for me, I thought I liked it. I don't really like this guy. Shimon is not a good guy. She could have. However, she didn't. She liked Shimon. She wanted to be married to Shimon. So therefore, she never did any miyun. She never said, no thanks, I'm not interested. Shimon now dies. So the halacha is, and this is just a piece of information we need to know, the miyun continues until she's a gedola. She can now say, I liked Shimon. I do not like Reuven. And she could do miyun with Reuven. She could say to Reuven.
She's not
she's still under 12. What's that?
She's not a virgin.
Doesn't matter. Well, I don't know why virgin matters, but.
Oh, I thought that was.
No, not at all. What we're specifically talking about is, has she reached the age of 12 yet? Is she a gedola?
Yeah. Okay.
If she's still 11, let's say Shimon dies a year after they got married, she was 10, let's say, so she's still a ketana, she still has the right to opt out. So let's say she opts out now. She says to Reuven, I don't want you to be my Yavam. She can. She can end the Zika completely and make it that she doesn't fall to Reuven at all. Now, if she did that, let's say she said to Reuven, I'm not interested in you. Okay? So now the question is like this. So the halacha is that if she does that, then what is she to Reuven? Midirabanan, she's an Eshesach. Because the Miyun isn't with Shimon. Shimon died. So that marriage ended intact. Right? All she's capable of doing is removing the Zika. This is a little bit of a complicated discussion, because you might say, 1 second, if Miyun works in my Freya, shouldn't it work to even remove? We're not trying to, it doesn't. The Shimon marriage sticks around. What doesn't stick around is the Zika that she just ended. This new Ishus that she has with Reuven, she can end that. So what is she effectively? Midirabanan, she's an Eshesach. So it's usher to be with this woman. Midirabanan. Mina Torah, it's fine, but midirabanan. So what's the halacha? What's the halacha? If with her, if let's say her, you can only do chalitza. You can't do bia. Midirabanan, it's usher. What's the halacha of Rachel? Mina Torah, Rachel is a full-fledged wife of Shimon, and Shimon died. So Rachel is a regular. Mina Torah, there's a zika here, right? So what's the halacha? It's a machlekes in the Gemara later on Daf Yud Aleph and Daf Yud Beis, whether we completely disregard the Leah situation and say that Rachel's a regular Yevamos. Go ahead, you can do Yibam. Why not? Whereas there's another opinion over there that says no, you can't do Yibam. Why? The Yibam you can't do there is because on a Derabanan level, there's like a similar like Erva situation here. Right? On a Derabanan level, Leah is not Zekuka Liyavam, but Rachel is Zekuka Liyavam. And this would be a similar case of like Grushasai or love of Sota or Islandess. We have a tzara of a woman who has no Yibam. Midarabanan. So we would say maybe Midarabanan, we say you can only do Chalitza.
She could have said yes, though.
She could have.
Let's say she could have said yes.
That's different. That's
but
what
he picked Rachel anyway.
Then he could have done Yibam for sure. Then there's nothing to talk about. What we're saying over here is, what if she says no? So if she says no, so certainly the young girl, there's going to be an Isser Yibam Midarabanan, and she would need a Chalitza Midarabanan. But what about Rachel, who min HaTorah has a Zika? So there's a machlokes later on whether you can do Yibam or you must do Chalitza. I mean, there's definitely a Zika. No one argues there's no Zika, right? Because it's only Darabanan to begin with. That's the case of Tzaras Mamenas. And what Rav and Rav and Ravasi would be saying is that case doesn't conform to the Mishnah, no matter who you go with over there. No matter whose opinion you go with over there, it doesn't work. Our Mishnah says the Erva Pater is not only herself, her tzara, mina yibum, mina chalitza, completely. There's nothing left to do. That Gemara, everyone holds you got to do at least chalitza. Maybe you can even do yibum. So that's the case our Mishnah is coming to include. The last case over here was tzaras machsa grushasa. Here's just a unique halacha we have to know. The halacha is if a man's married, okay, he's allowed to divorce it. Once he divorces his wife, he's allowed to remarry her. There's nothing wrong with remarrying your wife, unless she went and got married to someone else in between. If she got to get married to someone else in between, then the halacha is it's an Isser Lav, it's a Lo Saseh in the Torah. You're not allowed to be Machsir, return your Grushasei, your Grusha. Once your woman is divorced and she married someone else, you can't take her back. It's awesome. Now, remember, it's not a Chiyav Kares, so if you try to marry her, it will work. But you'll have a Chiyav to divorce her right away. The fourth time, or the fifth time, whatever.
If you don't divorce her?
And every time you have sex with her, you're being over on an Aveira. Every time.
What do you call it?
Malchus. Yeah, Malchus. Okay. So that's what's that? So Master Gushasa. So what's a tzara of a Master Gushasa? Real simple. Reuven and Shimon are brothers. Shimon is married to two ladies. One of them, we'll call her Leah. He married once, didn't like her, gave her away. Leah found some other guy. David will say David didn't like her either. David gave her back, and now Shimon went ahead and took her back. So now they're married. The marriage works. Problem is Leah is really not allowed to be married to him. He should divorce her. Instead of divorcing her, Shimon's not the firmest guy in the world. He dies. Maybe that's why he dies. Who knows? Yeah, so he dies. He's got two wives falling to Reuven. One of them, Rachel, is a completely fine, normal, regular case of Yibam. The Leah situation, it's okay. We have to figure this out. Min HaTorah, right? She's a wife, and there's a Zika. Midirabanan. Okay, so this is a little bit more complicated. But Midirabanan, let's just take it on evidence that a Machsa Grusha say that she's not supposed to do Yibam with Reuven. For now, we'll just assume that. I don't want to go into the details. We'll get to it when we get to the Gemara. Pause 1 second. Just want to finish the case and then go ahead. Since Midaraisa there's a Zika, but Midarabanan it's also to have Yibam. the with Leah, you're not supposed to do. You have to do chalitza. So machlokes in the Gemara, same like we're having now. What the halacha is by the tzara? Does the tzara, can you do yibum with Rachel, or can you only do chalitza with Rachel? So that case is also excluded from our Mishnah. And then we'll pick up from the drush. Go ahead.
Okay, so when you say
Where are you going up to?
this is a
Here.
fundamental
This
question
Gemara
that's
is
gonna affect
this Gemara takes 30 seconds to read.
Is chalitza one of the 613?
Yes, according to most Rishonim. Although some Rishonim say no. And there's a machlokas whether chalitza is what's referred to as a mitzvah chiyuvis or a mitzvah kiyumis. Meaning to say, is there a mitzvah? Let's say you have two old people. And there's then a situation of yibum. Let's say you have an old couple, never had kids, and the husband dies, and his brother, his 87-year-old brother, doesn't like his sister-in-law. They don't want to do yibum. He's in California. He's over here. They can't travel. Does he have to get on a plane to go do chalitza? Or do we say, no, you don't have to do it if you don't want to? It's just that if you want to get out of yibum, you got to do chalitza. That's a discussion.
So the thing is, if you say the chalitza is not a mitzvah, then every other question, every derabbanan case, it gets knocked out automatically.
Potentially. It's again, a longer conversation. But yeah, I hear where you're going. Okay, says the Gemara Weiler. This Gemara now goes fast. We're just going to learn out, everything we learned now is going to be learned from a drasha. We've been explaining it, but there's a drasha.
Have a great.
You have a great day. You have a
Go
great
pick
day.
up my peeps.
You got to do what you got to do. Hong Kong. Wheels on the bus, baby.
Yeah.
Okay, says the Gemara. Minani Mili, Rashi explains Minani Mili over here, nice and simple. That the erva, the Torah, the whole din of the Mishnah. Where do we know this from? All of the dinim in the Mishnah, we've been discussing it. We've all been discussing the mechanism. But who says that it's all true? Where did we learn it in the Torah? What are the psukim that tell us that this halach is
Okay, so
true?
where are you going down to? Just so we know now.
Right there.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines from the bottom.
Got it.
We're starting tomorrow with
Asadeh
Asadeh. Says the Gemara, Minani Mili to Tana Rabbanon. It's nice and quick. Isha ela chayisa leisikach litzur legala servasa lebechayeha. By an achos isha, the sister of your wife. We say the halacha in the Torah. The Torah says a pasuk that you're not allowed to be with her, and the pasuk says you're not allowed to be with her. Litzror. It uses the language of litzror. What's going on in the pasuk with litzror? What's going on in the pasuk here with aleha? There are a lot of extra words here. Says the Gemara, aleha matam and leimer. What does the word aleha in the pasuk mean? You can take it out. I mean, you read the pasuk. Isha elachosa, a wife and her sister lo sikach, you shall not take litzror to create a tzara. Legalo servasa aleha. You could just say legalo servasa b'chayeha. Skip aleha, not needed. So the Gemara says, no, let me explain to you. It's a Gzer Shava. It says aleha by achosisha, lefisha nemar yevama yavay aleha, and in the mitzvah of yibum, it uses the language of aleha. So since it uses the same word by yibum of aleha as it does by achosisha by aleha, and here's the punchline: shemeya ani understands the brayso afilu ba'achas mikol harayos hamuras b'torah kos medaber, that the yevama yavay aleha is I might have a havamina that it's going to go ahead and work by all of the arayos. Nemer kan aleha, but nemer lahalan aleha. To tell me what? What is aleha teaching me? Ma lahalan, meaning to say what? The mitzvah of yibum, when it said aleha, is b'mokim mitzvah, the mitzvah of yibum. Afkan, when it's talking about the erva of achos isha, it's b'mokim mitzvah, meaning to say what? That when the Torah says you can't be with your wife's sister, it was saying even when it's a mitzvah. Which mitzvah? What do you see? You see that yibum does not happen when the woman who is your yevama is an erva. So again, let's just speak it out loud. The pasuk by achosisha says aleha. The pasuk by the mitzvah of yibum says aleha. The aleha by yibum is a mitzvah. So we're going to say the aleha by achosisha is also talking about a scenario of a mitzvah, meaning also a mitzvah, and yet it's still saying she's usher to you. You see that even when there's a mitzvah of yibum, the erva is usher. That's the way the drasha works. And we understand from there that an achosisha, if she should fall to you, if let's say you're married to your wife and your brother's married to her sister, and your brother dies, so now your brother's wife is your wife's sister, falling to you. She's an erva, and the Torah tells you specifically that that woman, the wife of your sister, is going to be usher to you even in that scenario. Says the Gemara, that's very nice. Ve'eli elahi, that tells me the sister of your wife. What about the other 14 in the Mishnah? First let's jump to the tzara of your sister, your wife's sister. Tzara samina, and how do I know that din applies not only to your sister's wife, your wife's sister? What about the other woman she's married to Shimon with? Talmud Leimer Litzra, the pasuk says in Achos Isha, the same pasuk we just learned that applies even when there's a mitzvah. We're now seeing that mitzvah, that halacha is true not only for her but even for Litzra, the one that's in the co-wife with her. Says the Gemara, that's very nice. That tells me the tzara. How do I know the tzara? Meaning this whole idea of it even continuing beyond her. The language of litzrar is a little extra. It could have said lutzor, it said litzrar, the extra resh. We understand basically the drush is teaching me, the whole pasuk is effectively telling me by Achosisha that the sister of your wife is pater from Yibum. Not only that, her tzara is pater. Not only that, her tzara is tzara. This is already be the Gemara that Rebbe Kiveger asks the question which we mentioned yesterday, which is what I need the second. What do I need this third pasuk for? It should always be understood to be a tzara zerva. That's the bigger conversation and the beginning of opening up the entire Masechta according to many of the Achronim, but
so the Litzer is giving us Ad Sofa Olam.
Yeah.
We don't have a separate.
That although
Yeah.
what you're touching on is
Yeah.
a discussion in some of the Rosh Yeshiva Achronish Svarim that try to answer up Rabbi Kiveger's kasha. They try to say that because there's a Gemara actually later on, Ravashi, and I forget who. They actually have a machlokes about whether we have this drasha, this last drasha. Meaning Rabbi Kiveger's question that everyone sort of quotes as this sort of bomb kasha. Rabbi Kiveger is not asking it on the Gemara. He's not bothered on the Gemara. The Gemara can always say that this is going according to one side, and there's a shita later on who holds you don't have this drasa. He's asking it on a Tosfos over there. There's a Tosfos that's mashma that everyone's master to this drasha. Tosfos says that. That's when he asks the question. But the question, whether it's on Tosfos or the Gemara, is really irrelevant for our sake because it's really more just a tool. The question of opening up a question around how does Yibum and Chalitza and Zika work. Right, so that's really where that question comes from.
Because at the end of the day, sometimes we bring a drasha for something you could learn logically.
Right.
There's
The
no
Ritva actually says this drush is an asmat
Right,
meaning not the whole thing,
Right.
just this last
part
piece
of it, yeah.
is an asmat, and he says
Right.
it before it.
Right.
So clearly, Rabbi Kiveger and the Ritva, Rabbi Kiveger's question and the Ritva's understanding of our Gemara fit like lock and key. They're basically saying you don't need the drasha because every tzara is a tzara zerva, so it's ad soif ha'olam would always be that way. Either continues the Gemara, fine. So all I know right now is that an achos isha and all of her tzaros and her tzaros are going to be patura. No, asmachta just means that if all it is a derabanan and an asmachta b'alma, it's a derabanan. But sometimes you'll have a din Torah that we know for misvara, but we'll still want to peg it with an asmachta to say, I find a place in the Torah that's it's a good. It's like you know what it's like. It's like circumstantial evidence. It's not something I would use to say, for sure this happened. But it makes me feel a lot better to know that my logic is correct if I found the pasuk in the Torah that seems to support it. But it's not that I'm looking at that pasuk and that pasuk is telling me, hey, if I wouldn't have had this pasuk, I wouldn't know what to do. It weakens Rabbi Kiveger's question a lot more if you learn that way.
Like once in a while, you might bring us nafta for halach lo mashmi Sinai.
Yes.
We don't need.
We don't need because we have it for the Masorah, but it makes us feel a lot more confident in the Masorah. I view it lahavdil alfei avdolos. I shouldn't say it that far, but I look at it like the.
Or is litzor the?
No. He's just using it as he's just giving an example of another. He's just mentioning the concept of oftentimes we might have something that's halach l'moshmi Sinai, not this case, nothing to do here, where we'll still go find an asmachta for it. Why?
Yeah.
Because
We like to.
We like to. Yeah.
a good modern day version in my head would be like the Esha Torah Discovery Seminar of codes in the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
If someone proved to me that it was all a bunch of garbage, it wouldn't affect me, not even a little bit. I wouldn't lose a wink of sleep over it. Do I think there's something to it? Yeah, I do think there's something there. I don't know what it is. It's
and a very important firm scientist did prove that it's all statistically flawed. So I'll show that to you.
Yeah, I would love to read that because I find that humans find patterns in a lot of things. But okay, says the Gemara Weiter. The Gemara really does move here, but I want to make sure we finish it. So now at this stage of the drasha, we know an achos isha is aser and yibo, and we know that she paters her tzara and her tzara, but there's still 14 other people in the Mishnah. Ve'enli ela tzara tzara. Okay, let's read below tzara. Ela ve'enli ela achos isha shara rayos minayin. What about the other 14? So now we do what we do. Meaning, this is how Chazal and the Binyanavs of Mamatzinus and all this stuff of the Yud Gimel Midos Shator Nudrashas Bahem is going to go. Says the Gemara, Amris will say the following Mamatzinu, and this is a big one. Meaning, it's a big expansion. Meaning, this is like a penumbra of this is like once we prove that there's a right to privacy. Well, you know what? You can go kill that baby.
The numbers.
Yeah.
Emanation.
Right. Exactly. Shadows. Amris ma'achos isha. Just like the case of Achos Isha, which we just established on firm ground, removes Yibum from her and all her tzaras and her tzaras. She's miyuchedes. What's unique about an Achos Isha? And we'll find the following: Shehi erva, it's an arayos. V'chayav al zduna kares, she's chayav kares, meaning if sleeping with her is chayav kares.
Oh, thank you.
All right. V'chayav al zduna kares v'ashkagos chatas. That if b'mezid, right? We know every chayav kares, if you do it b'mezid. B'di'eved, If you did it b'shoigeg, you're chayiv achatas. That's how it works, right? Some of them you're chayiv kares, and if you get edus v'hasra, you're chayiv malchus. But in terms of your punishment is generally a chayiv kares, and that's if you did it on purpose, and if you did it b'shoigeg, you're chayiv to bring achatas. So this Ashes, this Achos Isha is a woman who, if you sleep with her, you'd be chayiv to bring a chatas. You'd be chayiv for a carbon if you did a b'shayg. If you did a b'mezid, the halacha is yechayiv kares. V'asur liyavam, and we know that the Achos Isha is going to be asur liyavam because we learned that from a pasuk. So too, everyone who's going to fit that category is going to have that din. We call it binyanav, or what we use in the Lashon Gemara, mamatzin. You know, when we like this, they'll do it like that. So too, avkol shehi erva, v'chayav and azduna kares, v'ashkegos achatos, asur liyavam. Meaning to say, one could theoretically speaking be medayik in the Gemara here, dafke kares and not misa, but that's not a fair drush. Meaning all of the chayve misa are also chayve krisos. They're chayve. It's bechal masay mana. Meaning chiyuv misa is just, instead of if they do it b'mezid we give malchus, we give them misa.
Mhm.
But sex with your mother is also chayve krisos. It's just that it's a chayve krisos that comes with a stricter punishment in this world. But the chayve krisos, the olam haba dika punishment is the same.
How do you forget that in this case it's your mother and you're only chayav a chatos? I don't understand.
I understand the question.
That you're shogeg. If
How could it be a shogeg?
How could it be?
Yeah,
a shogeg?
yeah,
You went to another.
You're saying you're just
city,
trying to find a scenario.
You
Yeah.
went to another city. You met a woman. You were adopted. You didn't know.
all right.
You can come up with scenarios. Yeah. It's dark. Whatever.
Dark. Yeah.
Yeah, who knows?
There's a famous case. A guy ripped out
Dark
his
in the
eyes.
whorehouse.
Yeah, the Gemara talks about it. I forgot where that is.
Dark in the whorehouse.
What are you talking about? What did you?
I said it's dark in the
Dark in
whorehouse.
the whorehouse.
I don't think anyone listens to our YouTube videos, so I think that's fun. Ve'eli alahain. So now we've established. So what do we have so far? We have achos isha all the way down to tzaros, and we've established that the erva of achos isha can be expanded to all of the other arayas. Now, interesting over here. Why would you not just say at this point? Why not just learn the entire thing by achos isha to all of the other arayas? I think it is. I think it's just the Gemara is doing it in steps. So Eli Elahain, I only know that they themselves, these other 14 arayos, they are going to pater themselves from Yibum. Tzaros and Minayin. How do I know they're tzaros? Amrisma, and here it's just a much more elaborate form of a mamatzinu. Amrisma achos isha miyuchetes shehi erva, like we said before. The chayan vol duna karz ashkas achatas. And here's the vasur liyavam and the tzaras asura. All of the tzaras are asur. Avkol shehi erva. The chayan vol duna karz ashkas achatas. Vasur liyavam. So also to asaras asura. So that gets us to all of the arayas having a ptur yibum and chalitza, and their tzaras have a ptur yibum and chalitza. Now notice over here, it doesn't now bring the third case of tzaras tarasa of the other arayas, which is a little bit of a raya to certain Rishonim who hold that there's just no girsa in this brisa of the tzaras tarasa, which would then really basically mean that Rabbi Kiveger's kasha just sort of falls off, because there isn't a drasha for tzaras tarasa. Adarabba, it's a support of the whole idea that you don't need a pasuk for tzaras tarasa. That's meaning, but again, it's not so clear. Says the Gemara, Mikan Amru, and here we're just going to state it emphatically in the Gemara, Mikan Amru, or maybe this is the Brisa explaining it, Chachamim, Mikan Amru, Chachamim, Chamesh, Esrei, Nashim, Paitras, Tzaresein, these are the 50 women who part of their Tzares, Ve'etzares, Tzaresein, and the Tzares of their Tzares, Mina Chalitza, Mina Yibim, Ad Seifa Oilam, this is our din of our Mishnah. Now the Gemara, the Brisa continues and says, okay, I have all these drushes to teach me the 15, Yachol, this Yachol here is very strange, but let's read it outside, yeah? Yachol, inside, Yachol, Shani, Marba, Avshesha, Ra'is, Chamuris, Mielu, what are we referring to here? These 6 arayas. So we mentioned when we were learning the Hagdama, and when we learned the Mishnah, that the 15 arayas that I mentioned in the Mishnah, these 15 arayas, the reason why they're mentioned, they're not the whole list. There's plenty of others listed in Perikut Ches and Achrei Mais. Why are those not listed? Now, which are the ones that are left out? So I'm not going to go through them because I forget them off the top of my head. I wrote down, but it's basically the 6 that could not possibly. Oh, you have a
amazing chart with all the Rishonim and the Shniyos.
Oh. Really? I'll take that after.
I'll make
that's a Steinzelt thing? Yeah. Okay. So you have the following. Basically, they all stem from things that are related to the father, right? So, Imai, your mother, right? Ashes Aviv, your father's wife, which could be your brother's mother, not your mother, right? Because he has more than one. Your father could have more than one wife. And then the 4 other ones effectively are cases that stem from your father's relationship. So let's say you have your so let's say it would be your father's wife, your father's your mother. Then you have your sister from your father, right? Achosome aviv. You have achos aviv, the sister of your father. Then you have your father's brother's wife. Okay, that's your other aunt. Yeah. And then there's a sixth one, which I can't remember off the top of my head. But either way, none of these people are mutter to Shimon and also to Reuven. They're either all also to Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda, or they're all mutter to Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Meaning these six chamuras that we just mentioned, which all really come, they're novea from the father, they're going to be usher on Shimon and Levi. Because again, the din of Yibum is a din in the father, brothers from the father. So any erva that is a connection to your father will also be an erva to them. So although there are many other cases, or at least 6 other cases in our Mishnah, theoretically speaking, that you can find in erva, we only list the 15 because only those 15 are uniquely usher to Ruvain, but could theoretically speaking be mutter to Shimon and the rest of his brothers because they're either through the mother's side or through his own, or through various different forms of marriage. Therefore, they don't affect his brothers. Since they don't affect the brothers, it's going to be okay. So says the Gemara, I might think, and this is a tremendous chiddush in the Havamina here. I might think that even though these 6 women could never be married to your brother, I might think that Lu Yitzur, in a scenario where they were married to a random guy, David married your father's wife after your father divorced her. This woman, David's wife, is an erva to you. Why? Because she is forever, in the rest of your life, the woman who was once married to your father. What if David has another wife? Call her Sarah. Sarah's unrelated to you. David's not related. No one's related to you. The only woman that's in that relationship that's related to you, sort of, is the woman that your father was married to. David dies. Now, there's no Yibum. David's not your brother.
Right.
But you might think that the Tzara is usher anyways. Why? So here, we're not going to hold this in the end. But here, I think, is an important point. And we touched on it earlier a little bit when we discussed, why would you ever think a Tzara is usher on her own? The Rabbi Akiva Eiger's question about a Tzara needing a pasuk. So we've been harping on the question. The question is so good. But what's the answer? Meaning, if you try to find ways around it, but if you hold that the question is a good question, and there is a drasha for Tzarasa, why do you need a pasuk? So all of the Rosh Yeshivas, they try to answer this question. I don't know what they all say. I haven't read it, and a lot of it is hard to understand. A lot of them is maybe splicing hairs at levels that it's hard for us to wrap our heads around. But one basic idea I think comes from the collection of their ideas, which is that whatever the answer is going to be, it's going to have to somehow revolve around the idea that the tzara, a tzara of an erva, isn't just simply a problem because she doesn't have a mitzvah of yibum. Because if that would be the case, the question just keeps on coming back. There must be something additional going on by a tzaras erva that isn't just simply an isser, like it's like a passive isser that comes on her now because she no longer has the mitzvah. There must be something occurring between the tzara and the erva. There must be something else going on, because otherwise, number one, Rabbi Akiva Eiger's question is a good question. What do I need a pasuk for? The answer is you need a pasuk to get rid of that thing. Now, they say it in different ways. Some of them say something proactive between the tzara and the erva, and some say it a little bit more reflective, like reflexively, meaning to say that they say something about the Isser Eishes Ach is unique. Once the Torah tells me that the Isser Eishes Ach doesn't apply in some scenarios, like Yibum, maybe on its own, the Isser Eishes Ach that would be in place after you take away the mitzvah, maybe that Eishes Ach isn't like strong enough on some level to affect the Isser of being pater from Yibum towards Tzara. Meaning herself it would, but not towards Tzara. Again, I'm speaking about this very superficially. These are not easy ideas, but I'm just pointing out there is another way to go through this. There clearly has to be. What's this have mean? The tzara, there's a tzara of a woman who's not married to your brother. So this has nothing to do with Yibum. And there's a havamina in this brisa. The fact that your erva is married to a man who has another wife, there's a havamina. Again, we're going to push it off, but there's a havamina that other woman should be usher to you. Why? There's no Eishes Ach. He's not your brother. So if all it is just remove the erva, removes the mitzvah, and you're left with the Eishes Ach, this havamina makes no sense. Mm-hmm. But if on some level a tzara makes an erva makes a tzara usher, something about a tzara being with an erva in a marriage together, in a bias, connects them. On some level, there has to be a lumdus, some type of idea where we connect it to, that would at least explain this havamina, and then might explain why I need a pasuk to say why it's Sarah is potter, because it isn't just simply that she doesn't have the mitzvah sequence. Okay, so
That's what you've been talking about so long, the whole buy it,
Yeah,
that there's something.
there has
special.
to be something there. So says the Gemara. How do I know that? Says the Gemara from Madrasha. She'ein Sarah. Gemara says like this. So how do I know? 1 second. Yochel, where'd I go?
Did you do Marba Sheisha Reis Chamuras already?
That's what I'm up to.
Yeah. It's like 20 lines up.
Yeah, here we go. I just lost the spot. Yochel Shnimar Ba'av Sheisha Reis Chamuras Me'elu Shiyutzer Yisei Nasurais. So the Brisa continues and says no. Amris, again, another mamatzino. Ma achos ishtoi miyuchedes shehi erva v'chayav v'nazduna karas hashkagos achatos ve'efshali nasi la'achim. And this is the point here that matters, right? Meaning we use this mamatzino to expand it even to this. Ve'asur liyabim v'tzarasa asura. So too, av kol shehi erva, any woman that's an erva v'chayav v'nazduna karas hashkagos achatos ve'efshali nasi la'achim, meaning one of the 15 in the Mishnah. Ve'asur liyavam. And now she's asur liyavam. Why? Because of that p'tur of erva. And therefore, because of that, sarasa asura, so to her tzara asur, yatsu sheisharayis chamuras mielu, who don't have that. Why? Because they can never marry the brother. Hoyel di efshali nasi la'achim, they can't marry the brother. Sarisean mutaras she'ein tzara ela me'ach. This line here is the key. This is the Gemara's maskana. Is the maskana of the Gemara here informed our entire hakdama. This maskana here is that no, the reason why a tzara is asur is because she's the tzara of a woman who they are collectively married to a brother. If they're not married to a brother, meaning in the maskana, it is yibum. But there is a havamina not like that. And the question is, how much of that havamina remains in the maskana? Because it's clear on some level that it's not just simply the yibum working here, the Isser Shah. Because if that's what it would be, you don't need a pasuk for that. Every tzara is not. Okay, that we'll hold here. We'll pick up from Esed Echelesase, which is a very shmacking Gemara. And Sugya, well, we went very long today, but
Shkaya,
I'm gonna have to start.
People needed review. And
Yeah.
find